Welcome to our podcast. So, we're diving into this recent congressional hearing where GOP allies grilled PBS and NPR for alleged bias. They painted these public media giants as radical left-wing echo chambers, calling out everything from their news coverage to even children's shows like Sesame Street.
That sounds wild. How exactly did they mix these serious charges with, I guess, some surreal references?
Well, the hearing was organized by Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, who labeled it anti-American airwaves. The GOP lawmakers claimed that PBS and NPR have been indoctrinating children and pushing a so-called communist agenda. They even asked, not without a smirk, if Elmo might be a member of the Communist Party.
Wait, so they were seriously linking a beloved children's character to a communist agenda? That's pretty far out.
Exactly. And it's like they interwove dark accusations with lighter, almost cartoonish references to shows like Curious George and jabs at Sesame Street characters. It was a heady mix of political theater and pop culture commentary.
That's quite the cocktail. So aside from these eyebrow-raising claims, what were the public media executives saying?
The heads of NPR and PBS came in strongly. Catherine Maher from NPR and Paula Kerger from PBS defended their networks as essential sources of fact-based, nonpartisan reporting. They pointed out that public media covers vital local issues, crop prices, local sports, news that really matters to communities nationwide.
Yeah, interesting. They basically emphasize the community service angle, right? That even in the age of digital news, these broadcasters fulfill a crucial local role.
Absolutely. They argued that with nearly 100% of Americans living within range of a public radio station, these networks are more than just a medium, they're a lifeline, especially in rural areas where local news can be scarce.
Fascinating. And this isn't the first time politics have clashed with public media funding, is it?
No, not at all. In fact, it's reminiscent of Fred Rogers testifying back in 1969 against funding cuts during the Nixon era. Public broadcasting has long been a political battleground. It's like history repeating itself, but with a modern twist.
That historical perspective really puts things in context. But I wonder, were these intense criticisms, like calling the networks left-wing echo chambers, effective in, tackling actual media bias, or just a way of rallying the political base?
That's a great question. On one hand, these strong statements tap into a broader conservative distrust of mainstream media, a narrative the Trump administration often pushed. On the other, the actual work done by PBS and NPR in delivering vital local journalism stands in stark contrast to those claims. It's like painting an entire institution with one overly broad brush.
Exactly. And the mix of dark pronouncements with silly cultural references, like jokes about Cookie Monster maybe silencing pro-cookie voters, seems almost like a distraction from the real issues.
Right? It's a curious blend. You have these grim accusations about a communist agenda right next to facetious quips involving Elmo and even Elon Musk. One Texas Democrat even held up a sign saying, "Fire Elon, save Elmo," which really underscores how bizarre this all is.
That sign sounds like it perfectly captures the absurdity of the situation. But do you think that this style of grilling public media might undermine legitimate concerns about media bias?
It's a bit of a double-edged sword. I mean, politically, these tactics certainly resonate with a faction of voters who already distrust big media. But when you mix in such overt theatrics, it risks being dismissed as mere spectacle rather than an earnest call for accountability.
Yeah, I get that. It's like sometimes the style overshadows the substance. Now let's talk a bit more about what the executives said. How did they handle these harsh criticisms?
Both Maher and Kerger stood their ground. Maher, for instance, while acknowledging some past remarks about President Trump on social media, which she now regrets, stressed that the network's editorial leadership is committed to factual, balanced reporting. Kerger emphasized the historical value of PBS in educating and engaging communities. Their core argument was that public media isn't about pushing a political agenda. It's about serving communities with reliable news, irrespective of politics.
That sounds like a robust defense. It's almost ironic. The critics are pushing a narrative of deep bias, while the networks provide such a broad range of services that go well beyond politics.
Exactly. And while some critics believe that defunding public media might somehow clean up biased reporting, many argue that it would actually erode a critical channel for information in local communities, especially in underserved areas.
So it really becomes a question of how to balance accountability with the need to preserve a trusted information source for everyone.
Precisely. And I do want to respectfully challenge one point here. While some say these accusations are just political theater, there are voices, like veteran NPR editor Uri Berliner, who have called for the broadcaster to acknowledge its progressive leanings openly. He even suggested turning down federal support voluntarily. It's an interesting, though controversial, proposal.
Yeah, that's a bold stance. I mean, turning down federal support sounds like it could have a major impact on how these networks operate and maintain independence.
Exactly. And that discussion taps into a long-standing debate. Public broadcasters have always been caught between providing unbiased reporting and facing partisan pressures, something that's only getting more complicated in today's polarized environment.
And when you throw in survey data showing that a significant portion of Americans still support federal funding for these stations, it seems like the public isn't entirely convinced by the GOP's narrative.
Right? Nearly 43% of adults are in favor of continuing federal funding for PBS and NPR, which highlights that many see these institutions as essential community resources.
It really makes you wonder how much political theater versus actual performance plays into public perception of media.
True, it's a fascinating interplay. While the theatrics, jokes about Elmo and all, might grab headlines, the real-world impact lies in supporting a media ecosystem that delivers reliable news and educative content. It's like having an anchor in a sea of digital noise.
Absolutely, and that's why debates about funding and bias are so critical, even if they often get lost in the spectacle.
Exactly. At the end of the day, maintaining a well-funded, independent public media system is essential for informed democracy, regardless of how loud the partisan theatrics might be.
Well said. It all comes down to ensuring that the American people, from urban centers to the most rural areas, continue to have access to news that's both factual and comprehensive.
Right? And that balance is what makes the conversation around public media so compelling and divisive. There's a debate here over not just what news is delivered, but how it's funded and who controls the narrative.
And considering the legacy of public broadcasting, from Mr. Rogers to today, it's a reminder that these institutions are more than just media outlets. They're part of the social fabric.
Absolutely. While the hearing may have been a spectacle full of hyperbolic rhetoric and sardonic jabs, it also sparked a necessary dialogue about media, bias, funding, and ultimately the role of journalism in our society.
It really is a multidimensional issue, one where, amid all the theatrics, the enduring principles of journalistic integrity and community service must prevail.
Exactly. And that's what makes these discussions so vital as our media landscape continues to evolve. Thanks for diving into this with me today.
Always a pleasure. Until next time, keep questioning and stay informed.